Hi, everyone. We're good? Okay. Silence! Wow. All right, hi everyone. My name is Amit, and today we're going to talk about sexy defense, maximizing the home field advantage, in which hopefully we'll find out how to make defense as sexy as offense. So this is our agenda. I'll give you some background of how I got into this whole sexy defense thing. We'll talk about some methodology, the details of it, and get to some conclusions. Here's the obligatory who am I. I'm not certified to do anything, basically. I deal with business, I deal with hacking. In my day job, I'm currently with IOActive, managing security services. I'm a hacker, researcher, a really bad developer. I dealt with cybercrime quite a bit in the past, which led to some research on cyber warfare, which is very interesting. In my spare time, I run the local DEF CON group in Tel Aviv, DC 9723. Also one of the founders of the PTS, the Penetration Testing Execution Standard, which if you're not familiar with, go and look it up. Some awesome stuff there from a lot of people. And the rest of the spare time, I do some military reserve duty with the Israeli Air Force. And most of all, dirty security. So, here's some background on defense. You probably had, as an organization or as a company, had some pen tests done, right? And you probably passed it because you're testing yourself and making sure that everything is fine. But what does it actually get you, right? It probably got you compliant to something, which is great, but did it really improve your security posture? Probably not, because you're filling checkboxes and making sure that you're compliant. And there's an old saying that goes, compliance has nothing to do with security, right? Agree? Thank you. And then maybe you even got a red team test, which kind of stressed out all your security controls and made sure that you're protected. So the red team came over, wreaked havoc, broke into the organization, stole data, and now you're like, all right, so now what? How did that make you feel? You had a pen test done and you passed it, but the red team kind of tore you up. So the first reaction that I usually get when we submit like a red team report is shock. Like, what? How'd you get to the data? And then it usually is followed by denial. It's like, no way, you must have did something wrong here, or you didn't play fair. Right? That's the usual response. Which is usually followed by, it's like, why did you do that? You weren't supposed to, bypass this or bypass that, or talk to our people to get them to divulge the data. Sometimes you get resistance. It's like, no, you did this wrong. It's not, the data is not right. Something was really incorrect here. And rarely, very rarely, you get acceptance, okay? I've never seen this in real life. And I've never seen real, true acceptance in real life. But I guess that's what we're trying to fix here. And usually what I try to get companies to do is really understand the reports, the pen testing reports, the red team reports. In order to do that, they need to be able to read through them and get the stuff that's relevant for the organization. So there's a lot of terminology involved. I know this is going to be the most boring, like 3 minutes. I'm going to try to blow through it, in which you're trying to get that pen test or red team report and translate it to something that you can actually use in the organization, which is hard. Because you need to figure out what's a vulnerability, what's an exposure, what's a threat, a risk, and be able to communicate that in a non-technical way. Okay, I know, I'm sorry. Because the people who need to understand it are not technical. They're usually business people way up in the organization that's going to sign off for whatever security investment you're trying to make. So really quickly, vulnerability, everyone knows what a vulnerability is, right? It's something that's wrong, usually with the software. I like to take it a little further and claim that a vulnerability doesn't exist only in software. It exists in processes, in procedures, in the way that organizations are working. Okay, so expand your perception of vulnerability to everything that the business is dealing with. All right, so processes, procedures relevant to the business. Okay, we're talking about the business here, not about a piece of software. And then there's exposure. It's like, well, it sounds kind of like vulnerability. It's not. An exposure connects a vulnerability to a threat model, which we'll talk about a little later, that is relevant for the organization, right? You can have a vulnerability in some piece of software that's completely irrelevant to your security posture because there is no exposure to someone who's out there to exploit it. Which brings us to threat. A threat is usually defined by a threat community or a threat agent. All right? There's got to be someone with an interest to get into your organization and steal the data. And you define the threat agent or threat community by two main elements, the capability, right, and accessibility to access your organization. So bear these in mind when you think about defensive posture, because this is what you're going to have to deal with. Otherwise, you are completely blind and you're working based on CISP advice from best practices, which doesn't account for a lot. And finally, there's risk. Risk is kind of the over-encompassing element that connects all of the terminology that we talked about before. It's usually, I like to look at it in a mathematical way. It's a probability of something bad happening. That's basically what risk is. And something bad happening, again, is a probability of a threat agent accessing some kind of insecure or vulnerable process or technology, exploiting it to get into your organizational data. Okay? So, promised 3 minutes. I'm probably good on it. That sets aside the terminology part. So let's talk a little bit about methodology. How do we deal as defenders with defense? So let's take a look at how we have been dealing with it. And the best example that I could come with is something like this. Right? We've been doing defense for ages. And unfortunately, not a lot has changed in the way that we do defense, right? This is the defender view from 1,000 years ago, and it's probably relevant for how a defender works in a modern organization. The defender's view is usually obscured or limited by all those defensive capabilities and controls that we're putting to protect ourselves. So if I'm trying to defend this castle or whatever it is, this is what I see behind my defenses. This can be applied just the same to all of our firewalls, IDSs, IPSs, antiviruses, anti-APT, whatever it is that we're using, which basically hinders our ability to look outside, and we're just looking for stuff that's coming in past those defenses, past these walls. Now, if you take a look at how the attacker views the same target, it's a completely different view. An attacker has a full view and full visibility into all the elements. I can see the castle, I can see all the security controls, I can see where your people are going over to have drinks in the pub after they're done with their shift. I can profile how everything works in the organization. I have much more knowledge on how the organization works in terms of security and defense than the defenders have on me as an attacker. And there's a imprinted or embedded imbalance between attackers and defenders here, which sucks, okay? So what we're trying to do is trying to fix it. What does that mean in terms of all that visibility and view? So if we take a look at how the attacker works from a process point of view, from a spectrum in terms of elements that they're dealing with, an attacker starts with intelligence gathering, right? I'm trying to understand what the organization does, how it works, where are the weak points, in order to be able to have all that data. And then I do vulnerability research, right? We're very good at that as attackers. I can get the same software that you're using and test it, before they even know I'm going to attack them, and test it internally. Try to find vulnerabilities in the software, in the processes that they use, in third parties that are connected to or that they use as part of their business processes. And I can do all that research, again, with zero visibility to the organization that I'm trying to attack. Only then I'm going to exploit everything that I've learned so far, okay? And this is the first interaction that I, as an attacker, have with the organizations that I'm trying to attack. And then I have control, so I'm establishing control over whatever elements I manage to break into, and then some post-exploitation. Exploitation, some reason, disappeared from my slide. But post-exploitation is usually grabbing the data and making sure that I can take it out so I can sell it, use it, abuse it, whatever it is, put it on Pastebin or WikiLeaks or whatever my favorite public website is. Now, how does it look from a defender's perspective? What do we actually do as defenders right now in terms of this spectrum? Well, unfortunately, it sums up somewhere like there. We're very good at detecting when we're being attacked or when we're being owned. So we're sitting there waiting for all our fancy, security controls with the blinking blue lights to tell us, hey, you just got owned, deal with it. And then we do mitigation and containment and incident response and all that fancy stuff that we are so good at doing, and doing some forensics to figure out exactly how deep they went and how they exfiltrated the data and what's the command control structure and so on and so forth. Which, again, by comparison to what the attacker spectrum is very limited. And what we're trying to do here with making defense a little sexier or a little more effective in the way I see it is basically add on a few elements to even the playing field, let's call it, okay? So I'm going to start with threat modeling as a defender. Before anyone even attacks me, I need to perform threat modeling to understand what are the assets that I'm protecting, really, in the organization. It could be data, could be people, could be processes, whatever it is. On top of that, after I did my threat modeling, and again, I understood who is out there to get me, who are my threat communities, I can actually do some intelligence gathering on them. Okay, once I figure out, all right, so there's this hacker group over there, or anonymous, or whoever it is, or some nation state or a competitor trying to get my data, it's okay for me to do intelligence gathering on them to understand how they work, what are they trying to get, what their techniques are, where do they get their tools, and then correlate a lot of the data that I already have in the organization, and correlate all of the intelligence gathering information that I did in order to get to a point where I can see the attack coming in before it actually hits me. Novelty, right? It's a great idea. So I can be ready for the attack before it actually happens in my organization, instead of just waiting for my devices to tell me that I'm owned. Now, that brings a lot of problems to the way that we're currently doing defense, because Spacework mentioned before, there's a big thing about security rock stars and egos. That all has to go away. We need to understand that no one person, no one rock star that I can bring and pay, a lot of money to, bring it into my organization, they're not going to solve everything. It's about the whole picture. It's about building a proper strategy. So it's not about people, it's not about egos, it's not about skills even of specific individuals that I need. It's about looking at the whole picture and understanding, again, that it's not fair. The attacker has more information than I do on the attackers. Once we get out of that paradigm and understand that this is where we stand, only then we can start acting defensively in a more correct manner. Okay? It's about having a mindset of constant improvement. You're never going to be 100% secure. That's what they teach us when we start dealing with security. Okay? That's when they teach us when we go to customer, if we're consultants or whatever it is, and we tell them, I'm going to help you be more secure, but I can't guarantee that you're not going to get hacked. And there's always be gaps in the defense. And the whole purpose of this is finding those gaps before the attackers finds them and take advantage of them. So in order to do that, we start with mapping. But real mapping, not like, do you have a network diagram of the network, some Visio, and in 2 minutes you get a response in the email. Sure, there it is, you get a Visio, and everything's fine. The Visio usually lies because it's old, because it's not updated, because it doesn't reflect what's really out there in the field. So we need to really map what's going on in the organization. And you need to understand that all those Visios are meaningless unless you really understand what the business actually does. Okay? You need to figure out what are the business processes. Who are the people that are involved in those processes, again, that could be vulnerable to attacks. A process can be vulnerable, as I said before. It's not just about technology. Technology just supports those processes. How does the business make money? What are we actually trying to protect? Where are those assets that I need to protect? Unless I know them, I'm just working blindly, kind of carpet bombing. We'll put an IPS here and an IDS there and a firewall and an AV because it's best practice. Okay? It's meaningless. You're just throwing money to the toilet unless you know exactly what you're protecting. And then you figure out what are your security and intelligence assets. So you can fit them into that big picture that you've just drawn and understand exactly how to use them in the context of risk management. So a lot of times I get asked, so all right, Ian, I got it. How do we actually start? Seems like a big project. Where do we begin? Well, my recommendation is to actually start with reports that you already have. Because people came over, did some good work, they pen tested you, they did the vuln assessment, they red teamed you even. So start with that information. Make sure that it's valid, translate it again to your organization and business, and work up from there while weeding out all the irrelevancies, right? All those trace commands in HTTP and trace routes and any vulnerability that's not relevant to your actual risk management and organization, just ignore it. There's no point of investing any thought or money in it. And kind of create a map that includes everything that we've discussed, all right? Not just a Visio of how your network is built, but a map of how your organization works, process-wise, technology-wise, people-wise. Map out the assets, right? In this example, there's the little, you shot the share of stars. Map out the people and the processes, the inputs, the data, how it gets processed, and then map out the vulnerabilities that you found in those processes. Based on that, you can actually start working bottom up to protect your assets, to mitigate potential attacks on your vulnerabilities, and to figure how relevant those vulnerabilities are actually are to your organization. And then use all the data. We have 90% of the data that we need in our hands already. We're just not using it correctly. Okay, there are lots of logs that we're ignoring. Once we get to a point where we can correlate all those logs in a meaningful way, again, that corresponds to the mapping that we've done, we'll get tons of information that we haven't used before, because now we have it in context of the risk, in context of the threat, and we can actually do something about it. On top of those logs, I mentioned before that you need to use intelligence. So we start with raw intelligence, stuff that we can get free from the internet, from analysts, from newspapers, any data that's relevant to our organization. All right? If my business is located in Brazil, I will look for relevant information from Brazil. Could be local news, local, competitors, threat actors here. Business development, marketing is going to give you a lot of information on who's out there to harm your organization, because you have competitors, okay? Sales will give you a lot of information about how your existing clients and partners and competitors are relevant to your business. So use that, and again, correlate it, everything back to this super engine that you need to have at the back end. Correlate additional information, like early warning signs, funky behavior from your network, from your PCs, call volume in your call center, in your support, in your IT department. All of those things in the right context of news, of logs, of whatever it is, have a meaning to you as a defender in terms of what's going on. Do I need to be worried about this, or is it just, holiday season and everyone is working remotely and I have connection problems? Right? So you need to figure out the context of all of that information and just correlate it back. And last and not least, people. People can tell you a lot about what's going on. The only problem with people is that they don't have built-in log mechanisms that you can use. So you need to communicate with them. I know, it's a new concept. You need to go out there and talk to people and figure out what's going on, what are they dealing with. It's salespeople, it's technical people, it's people inside our organization dealing with accounting, with processing. Get connected to them, get them to tell you what's going on, and basically raise their awareness and make sure that once they figure out, once they see something that's kind of funky or weird, that they'll be able to tell you because they know you exist. Most people in organizations don't know who to talk to when something funky happens because they don't know who the security department is, right? Or they don't know who's in charge of risk. And as I said before, correlate. Correlate everything in the right context, in the right timeline, right? Events can happen over time, and individually they might not have a big significance, but when you correlate them in the context of other events over time, they could mean a lot to you, and they can raise enough flags for you to understand, okay, I think we're going to be attacked soon because something's happening, right? There's a paradigm shift in the forums that some hackers are going to, and they're talking about this and that technology, and I have that technology. Okay, or they're talking about some assets, credit card numbers, gift cards, whatever it is. I have them, I deal with them, I process them. It's relevant to me, I should be worried about it and deal with it. Now, this is all nice and fancy, but you actually need to act upon it. You need to build a defensive strategy that takes all of that into account, train people to identify those things, then throw in some technology into the mix to make sure that it supports whatever strategy you came up with and work with it. So the first thing is to assess where you are, security-wise. Again, I'm a big fan of red teaming because it's kind of a step up from pen testing. It's not just a technical thing because you're testing actually how the organization works. And again, lying to yourself, but just taking a pen test and passing it and putting a checkbox, I'm compliant, isn't going to help you a lot in the long run. And expect change, because the last pen test you had and this pen test that you're going to have are going to be different. because things change over time. Business grows, people move jobs, technology changes, it gets older, you get new partners, you get new business processes. You need to take all of that into account and know that your job is never going to stop. You're never going to be good enough because you're going to have to keep chasing those processes and businesses and new lines of products that you're coming up with and protect it. In that sense, there's no point of signing off of a security strategy, all right? There isn't a concept of like a big document that you have. It's like, this is our security strategy. Great. From the second you printed it, it's obsolete by now because things change in your organization. You can have guidelines, which is fine, but your strategy needs to be open for changes and take into account all those business elements that are living in your environment. And you need to communicate that back to people who understand who to communicate it back in terms of, all right, so we had a new business process change, or we have a new supplier that's changing the way that we do business. And your job is basically to support that change and not just say, no, 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 you can't do that. Wrong. You can do everything you need to in order to make the business work, as long as I know about it so I can support it. And again, align outwards. Make sure that what you're doing is relevant to other organizations in your market, okay? Because they're dealing with the same problems that you're probably dealing with. Work with others well, keep track of new things on the offensive side, all right? So you're going to conferences like this, and you figure out, all right, so I see some new stuff on CDMA modems, and I see some new stuff on web UI. Some of that is relevant to me because I have those devices. They're supporting some processes in my organization. Now I know what to expect and how to protect from it. Never accept a successful audit. Again, I'm rambling again on compliance because it's just wrong. Because that's not a sign of a good defense. Okay? It's usually going to prove the opposite. And when you do get compliant, you know what that means? As the lowest common denominator in your industry. Well, like, yeah, good job. You're just as good as the worst company in your business. That's not where you want to be. You want to be on top. You want to be ahead of the competition. You want to be ahead of the attackers. And again, remember that it's not about technology or people or skills. It's what we call in the industry cat herding. It's about making sure that everything works together and the tech people can talk to the business people and everything is supported and is actually working. Now, at that point, you're in a really good stage, all right? You've got everything figured out. You know what's going on. You've got some intelligence on your adversaries. You know where the attacks are probably going to happen. You mapped out your assets that you're protecting, so you're focusing on them instead of just some obscure Linux server that got owned and doesn't mean a thing to your organization. At that point, what you usually want to do is take it a step further, all right? And do some counterintelligence. Own up to your information. This is really about owning your organization, owning your data. As the title says, is taking or maximizing the home field advantage. All right? You have a huge advantage because you know the landscape that you're protecting. Okay? And you have the data, you have the intelligence, you have the technology. Set traps. If you're trying to catch attackers, what a better way is there other than set traps for them to fall into, so that you'll get early warning signs and alerts that something is happening and someone is targeting your organization. You can booby trap tools, you can work with law enforcement, and most importantly, I can't stress this enough, work within the legal boundaries. Now, I'm not a lawyer, which is an important thing to note, but I've worked with lawyers a lot, and it's really fun to turn lawyers into hackers, because law is very much like technology. It's extremely hackable. And once you figure out, once you get the lawyers out of that, oh, you can't do that mode, into a, you can't do it like this, but if we think about it and we set up this and that company and we hire these guys in that jurisdiction and we put the servers over there and this is cloud and this is, you know, this is Europe or South America, and you can do a lot of stuff that you wouldn't be able to do before. Again, just think about how to use those layers. Here's a few examples, again, of taking that home field advantage and trying to use it a little better. I'm running out of time, so I'll blow through it. And again, these are examples from jobs that we did in the past. In this one, we're seeing, we've identified a threat community that uses a lot of tools from a specific forum. So we go to the forum and figure out what's going on there. In this specific post, there's a RAT, remote access tool, that is being used or published there. And it's got a lot of features and screenshots and stuff like that. In this case, we managed to get into the forum and, let's call it, modify the actual binary that was offered for download here. So we thought that, cool, someone is going to use this Trojan or RAT. How about we put a RAT into the RAT, so we'll get information about who's using that tool as they download it and as they run it. Awesome. Okay? Again, knowing exactly who your threat communities are, and we're not talking about a specific threat agent. This is a whole community. All right? So they're dealing with illegal software here or creating attack tools. How hard it is to modify a tool like that and implant something in it that will tell you about who's using it. Another example, this is a keylogger. This is a different forum. I think this one is in Spanish. Again, a different customer, different threat community. We can, again, get access to that and get a ping from everyone who's using this. This one I love. This is a FUD. Everyone knows what a FUD is? Fully undetectable? Yeah? Crypter? No? Lost in translation? Yes. This is a cool one. This claimed to be a fully undetectable crypter, which turned out it wasn't. It was missing one AV. Avira detected the binary that is produced. So we managed to modify it, improve it, so that it would actually be fully undetectable. But we've changed the crypter so it would leave a specific signature. That way, we took that signature, put it into Snort in all the perimeter defenses, and we knew exactly when something was sent over because we had that signature. And we can trace it back specifically to the person who was using this or specifically to the community that was using this crypter because we expected them to use it. We knew who our aggressors are. I talked about law. Again, a good example for law hacking, Microsoft. Anyone from Microsoft here? Did a fantastic job taking down Bredo Lab. They used trademark infringement claims to basically own every PC that was infected with Bredo Lab. That's phenomenal. I've talked about tools. Again, booby traps, honeypots. Use them. You can learn a lot about your threat communities by interacting with them. Okay, so Kipo is a great example. Go download it. It's free. It's open source. And you can learn a lot about how attackers behave. You can learn a lot about the tools they're using because their first thing is they're going to do is try to install some backdoor on your hacked server. Same goes for artillery. A good friend of mine, Dave Kennedy, wrote this in like 4 hours of frantic coding probably. Basically open up a lot of listening ports and booby trap them, right? Block everyone who touches them. You can modify it to do alerts. You can do a lot of fun stuff with it. And then again, add the technology. Correlate everything that you got into something that's meaningful for your defensive strategy. Last but not least, play nice with others. Everything that you learn, share to the extent that you can share with the relevant organizations around you. Could be certs, governments, peers, competitors. You'll find a lot of channels opening up that you can get information and post information to and learn better about how to defend yourself a little more effectively. Conclusion, the whole is greater than the sum of its elements. Again, don't just look at a specific technology. Don't look at a specific type of attack. Don't just look at your organization from an IT perspective, because you're going to lose, period. I guarantee that. It's my job to guarantee that. Look at this from a business perspective, understand who you're working with, understand what you're protecting, and work across everything. That's all I have for you. I'm 5 minutes over time, so I'm going to kick down. Questions? Comments? All right, thank you.